On the day she was supposed to travel here, she died.
Oh dear.
So
now, was that picture taken before or after your surgery?
that was after my
After the
surgery,
surgery, okay.
and it was a fundraiser for that charity he started in Venezuela.
Okay.
He decided that was not going to happen again in Venezuela, and it hasn't. Their liver transplant program is up and running and self-sustaining, and now they're going to start a new program at the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And
Now, that picture with a lot of people in it, who is that group? If we
that was at the same fundraising party to raise money.
There we go.
And now the adults in the picture, it's Dr. Cato and the lady who's dressed in dark gray, third from the right, that's Carolina Herrera. She's a world famous ladies clothing designer. She was a principal sponsor of the fundraising dinner, and Dr. Vedancourt is in the picture. Every other person is a child whose life Dr. Cato has saved.
Wow, that's amazing. I was going to ask you if you had any idea how many of these procedures he had done.
For the liver transplants, he's done probably dozens and dozens of liver transplants. For procedures like mine, he's done about 15.
15.
His first case was a 7-year-old girl. She's still alive. She had cancer, similar to me, and it's on account of his being that much down on the learning curve from her surgery. He was able to shorten mine and do a better job. But I wanted to finish on this procedure about where in a child he leaves part of the liver, the native liver, if he can. After a year or so, usually that native liver will regenerate itself in the child. Then he can stop the immunosuppressant drugs, which keep the body from rejecting the donor liver, and you don't want to be taking those if you don't have to. He can stop those drugs. The child will reject the donor liver, but at this point, her native liver can pick up the slack, and she's okay. She's literally cured and doesn't have to take those drugs for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
So in an interview when I was studying, because I became sort of an acolyte for Dr. Cato, I read an interview where people would come to him for these surgeries that no one had ever tried before, and because he has that reputation of being able to do things that others can't. And he said, you know, in medical school you learn a lot about the standard of care, but you can't use that just as an opportunity to say no. And my policy is never to start with no as the answer.
Sounds like the Jim Valvano thing, you know, never, never, ever give up, you know.
That's right.
Yeah. So we left you, I think, in bed with Sally, and she had asked about the blood vessel. Going from there.
So I continued my recovery in New York. It ended up, I did have to stay there for 3 months, which I never really believed. I thought I was going to catch a flight and come home, but I was dependent on IV fluids that whole time. I could not drink or absorb enough fluid on my own. So Sally had to give me IV infusions of saline solution twice a day to keep me hydrated so I wouldn't just blow away. And she did a great job. I also had a feeding tube because I couldn't take in enough nutrition on my own. So she had to do that. So she did all the work. I lay on the couch for 3 months and watched Say Yes to the Dress and other reality TV shows. And then I was able to come home and start resuming an ordinary life. I have chemo now 2 days every month, and you know that whacks you. It makes you tired. But
I'm sure. Yeah.
Other than that, I have a normal life. I enjoy every single day. I realize how precious every day is, and I always appreciated my family and friends, but now even more so.
Sure. Well, in addition to your wife, you have a very understanding employer, and people have, I'm sure, been very cooperative with you on this. And supportive.
My employer has been great. You know, they kept my office for me when I wasn't doing a whole lot, and I can't say that I'm even now pulling a full load.
Those weren't billable hours on the on the couch.
I have nothing but wonderful things to say about both Blue Cross Blue Shield and United Healthcare. They have been fabulous. They haven't questioned anything. They approved the surgery that Dr. Cato performed. It needed pre-approval, but they turned that around in less than 24 hours. They coded it as transplant surgery, which it was, except for I was my own donor. Both of those insurance companies assigned me a nurse navigator and said, you know, if you have any problems with anything, or if you have any questions, or if you just want to talk to somebody, call her. And that's been awfully nice. I mean, there are a lot of things wrong with our healthcare system, and you know, I could talk another 2 days about some fixes that we need to do, mainly how to control costs, but there are an awful lot of good things about our healthcare system as well.
Yeah, there are. You know, but you talked about so you wouldn't blow away. Folks, you may think Bob looks thin, but I've known Bob a long, long time. He's never been much bigger than this. You look great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you really do. You mentioned chemo. Some people out there may be facing that or wondering about it. Share with us a little bit about what they might expect.
Well, they've made a lot of advances now, and there's some chemotherapies that are very targeted and do not make you sick. Unfortunately, none of those work on me. I actually tried one of those. It didn't do anything. So there are also some very old line drugs that have been around for 30 years, since, you know, or even longer, the dawn of the age of chemotherapy. I mean, it's relatively new. These drugs are very harsh, and they can really make you feel tired and sick. Those are the drugs that are working on me, and I'm happy to have them. And my oncologists and I agree, say these drugs are helping. They're shrinking the tumor. As long as they're working, we need to keep using them. You need to keep taking them. And I say, that sounds great. Thank you. For about for a whole day that the infusion takes, I have to basically sit in a chair because they have to time everything. They have to give me drugs to militate against the side effects of the chemo, and more drugs to militate against the side effects from the drugs that militate against the side effects. And but I'm happy that those drugs are there, that we have people in Greensboro who know what they're doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You mentioned insurance, and that's an interesting topic. I know we don't want to get too political on this program, but anything briefly you could tell us about some changes you would like to see in our healthcare system?
Well, since you asked for it, Jay, if we really want to save any money, we can keep doing what we're doing, and we can continue to spend over 15% of our gross domestic product on healthcare. But if we want to save money, we're going to have to go to a European system, and they're all different types. Britain has one, which is a single payer. Most of Europe has a different type, which does use insurance companies, but they don't write the policy. The government writes the policy. And as a society, we're going to have to make some hard choices, particularly about end of life, which we're not making right now. But we're also burning up, even if you leave end of life decisions alone, and we could decide as a society we want to do that, we're burning up a whole lot of money with insurance companies. It didn't happen in my case, but saying, no, this is not covered. We're not going to pay for this, and then you appeal that, and the hospital has filled out the form wrong, so the insurance company says, well, this form isn't the standard form, we can't accept it. And so we pay people to fight with each other right now. In England and in Europe, they just have one form for everything, so all that administrative cost disappears. I mean, that eats up a good, 10-15% of what gets spent on healthcare right now.
Yeah.
And there's just a better way to do it where we can get everybody all together. Now, one good thing is that Obamacare is done. It's got almost everybody covered and almost everybody paying something. Well, that's what you need. Before, we were collapsing because more and more people were getting out of the system, leaving more and more uninsured people. But those people were getting care. They were getting it at the emergency room where it was most expensive, and then the taxpayers and the private insurance companies were paying for it at that point of service. It's much cheaper to deliver for a lot of diseases like heart disease, say, or diabetes at a much lower level in the doctor's office. And that's we're going to gain on it. You can't do everything overnight. I'm
No.
very hopeful.
Right. Well, those are some very good suggestions. I hope some of our lawmakers and people that have the power to do something about that will. Is there a support group here in town that you belong to? Or are there cancer or support groups for cancer people?
There are. I have, rightly or wrongly, and usually at every doctor's visit, a nurse asks, "Do you occasionally feel despair?" And frankly, I do.
Well, who wouldn't with your situation?
But
Yeah.
you know, I never know what's around the corner. I could have something go wrong, and I did have something go wrong after one of the chemo sessions where I had way too much. I developed pneumonia and lung collapse and intestinal blockage. I ended up in the hospital for over a month. But I just have great friends. I have a great family. I talk to them. I talk to everybody. I wouldn't be on the show if I weren't a talker, and it's therapy. And I think that's the real value, is you talking, not so much the person giving you advice.
Right.
I get my advice from my wife, my children, my mom, and my friends, and I'm happy telling my story, and that's my therapy.
Well, you've done a wonderful job of telling it, and I know that this has been a learning experience and a great lesson for a lot of our viewers, and I'm sure it's brought hope and encouragement to people who may be facing, certainly maybe not one as serious as you had, because I understand the kind you had is one of the most serious kinds of cancer you can have. But people who are facing cancer can certainly take encouragement from your story.
It's a rough diagnosis, but I tell you another thing. I mean, it's really my friends that pulled me through. Dr. Sam LeBauer and his brother, and if I hadn't been friends with Mitchell Summers and wanted to celebrate his success with CTG, and if all these people didn't already know what I was going through, if I'd kept it to myself, I probably would have never gotten to Dr. Cato, because it was only through telling people what was happening and getting their suggestions and getting actually Dr. Sam LeBauer's directive, "You are going to New York, okay? You are going to Sloan." I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have lasted long enough. And even if I'd gotten there, I might have got there too late, because the tumor hadn't slowed down. Dr. Cato was going to be in Japan for 3 months. He operates over there too. And if I'd missed his window before he left, who knows what might have happened, and I wouldn't have been healthy enough for a 14.5-hour surgery.
Well, Bob, it's a great story, and certainly want to thank you for coming and sharing it with our viewers, and wish you the very, very best, and maybe that 5 years will turn into much, much more.
I think it will, and I love what you're doing on the show here in Greensboro. It's an asset to our community, and you are too.
Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate that. And as always, we thank you for watching our program.
You're watching Greensboro Community Television.